Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel for another segment of Welcome to the Dark Sun. As I said last episode, we're almost done our campaign, and so before we got to the end of that and kind of wrapped everything up, I wanted to kind of give an update on where our characters are now as suggested by Roger Mars. So here we are and we're going to talk about some characters. I have a bunch of sheets here from the players and we're just gonna go through and figure out if we can figure out a good way to do this. If you've been around for a while, you know that we do have 6 players that come to the table, though typically we have a core 4 and then 2 that kind of rotate in and out. And I managed to get all those players to sit down and write something down about what they want to share about their character. Because it's Dark Sun, we all started at level 3, and by the end of it, we were all about halfway, I would say, to level 9, so 8.5. We also had the option to take feats at level 4 and level 8 if we chose to, or, you know, just the ability score increase. Everybody kind of wrote down a vast array of things, and so I'm just going to try to make it as concise as I can and as consistent as I can. And in no particular order, I'm going to start with Bardock, because Bardock's everybody's favorite character, right? So if you don't recall, Bardock is a mole, he was a former slave, and he is a druid. He's also a crotchety old man, but the player didn't write that down on the paper, that's just something that I have observed. He did take a feat at level 4, which was the feat Observant, which basically gave him a passive perception of 20 and I think advantage on rolls, which is just a little ridiculous, but it really helped us out. He wasn't much of a fighter, and I could probably count on one hand how many times he actually hit somebody with a melee weapon. But as a druid, he did well to keep us alive and keep us with food by producing good berries, and he could produce 1 for every level that he was, which when he got up to level 5, he could feed everybody, so it was great. And he could also create water. And the player said that these were the greatest utility spells that you could take in Dark Sun. And honestly, it made a huge difference being able to rely on that and not have to carry as much water or as many rations. Just knowing that you have that good berry and water every day is amazing. A ritual that Bardock ended up using pretty regularly was find plant or animal, and it was great when we had a quest where we had to go find a specific thing like a fire beetle. Then he could just do that ritual, track it down. Great, within 5 miles we would be able to find it. For any outdoor battles, Bardock's spell of choice was Call Lightning, and it was pretty boss because there were actually a few times where there was like a lightning storm and he was just able to pull it to himself and then rain lightning down on people. It's pretty effective. But I would say the most effective spell that Bardock had when it came off was Hold Person. This saved us in many cases in battles that should have maybe killed us. But because Bardock was able to get a hold on them, any melee hit was an auto crit, and so you are pumping so much damage into people. And I would say that this was like one of the single most effective things that Bardock did across the board, was getting a Hold Person on someone. It didn't always work, but when it did, it was fight changing for us. And lastly, Bardock decided to leave some words of advice, which are, remember kids, praise Kalik, and never trust an elf. Because if you remember anything about Bardock, he loves King Kalik and he hates elves. Speaking of elves, the next person we're going to talk about is Dono of the clan Arigato. Dono is an elf and his entire clan was decimated by the Iron Rider, and he's the only one left bearing the standard of his clan. He is a ranger and he's most proficient with the bow and arrow, and at level 4 he took the feat Sharpshooter, which if you don't know lets him hit with regular vantage up to 600 feet, which is great because he can rain death on people at a very long range. In a recent quest he managed to pick up a new bow called Blackfire, which is bone with mithril infused in it, and it gives him a +1 to hit. He also used Colossal Slayer a lot, so as if somebody was already damaged, then he could rain down some extra damage on them. And near the very end, one of the spells he took was Hunter's Mark, which let him put another D6 into its target. He wore leather armor, and along the way he picked up a Ring of Life, which basically just let him gain an extra hit dice every day. Which was important because Dono's big mouth meant that he got hit a lot more than most of us. And because all he used for a weapon was a bow and arrow, on a typical day Dono would go through about 100 arrows, so he was constantly buying new ones even after recovering half of those. And finally, probably Dono's greatest character trait, or maybe flaw, is that everything he does must be legendary. So he wants to go into battle, he wants to be good, he wants to look good doing it, and he wants everyone to know about it afterwards. At one point, Vashti offered to give him advantage on all his to-hit rolls, but the caveat was that Dono would have to be invisible. And so he turned it down because he wanted people to see what he was doing. That's it for Dono, but we might as well just segue over into Vashti while we're at it. So Vashti is a half-elf lore bard, and like Bardock, she was a former slave. Out of all the characters in our campaign, I would say that Vashti had the best weapons. She had a steel longsword, an iron spear, and a steel dagger. A steel dagger, which she stole off a Templar and then just kind of got the Templar sign taken off of. But despite that, she was more of a spellcaster than anything I found. And she had 3 very effective spells where she didn't really need to get near anybody. The first one was Fireball, which was amazing in basically every situation. The next one was Cloud of Daggers, which was great because you put that on someone and if they start their turn in that Cloud of Daggers, they take damage. And then the third one was Enlarge Person, which was super important for her other skill and pastime of just grappling everything possible. Because that's what Vashti did. Vashti grappled everything and anything that she could. And just like Bardock's Hold Person, Vashti's grappling was great for us because she would grapple an enemy, force it to the ground, and then we'd all get advantage on it. For feats, Vashti took Lucky at level 4, and then at level 8, she took Mage Slayer in anticipation of us going up against Cinder the Defiler. I'd get a little bit more into that right now, but you're going to have to wait for the update to find out how that battle with Cinder went and how Mage Slayer came into play. Very few people in our party actually wore armor. Vashti was one of them, and she actually had a piecemeal leather kind of situation going on, which is slightly better than regular leather. Despite being a lore bard and kind of knowing all the things, Vashti refused to share any knowledge or information with anyone else, including the rest of the party, unless it was like immediately necessary. Because the whole time, Vashti was a little bit jaded, having been a slave, and also just generally unashamedly brutal towards other people. This caused a lot of issues, as you might imagine. Not as many as Bardock or Dono caused us, but in her own right, Vashti could step up and put her foot in a situation. And I think it's because she knew that all of her friends in the party were going to kind of talk the situation down, and she wouldn't just randomly be killing people or Templar on the streets. But she did that one time, kill the Templar. And now we're coming to the side of the party that didn't open our mouths to get everybody in trouble. The first on this list was Nibbles, who is a halfling and a monk. So she didn't have any armor and she didn't have any weapons because she just went in and punched a bunch with her fists. At level 4, she took the Lucky feat just like Vashti, which actually worked out really well for her, especially with her ability as a halfling to re-roll 1s. And then at level 8, she bumped her dex up by 2 to make it a 22, which you can do in Dark Sun, and she just became an initiative-winning fist-punching machine. Speaking of, her favorite thing to use her key points for was extra attacks, so she could punch even more things. In battle, she would always try to get to the forefront first thing. Because she didn't really have a huge range of ranged attacks, it made more sense for her to just get up, start punching, and start tanking. Because of her propensity for dealing out death, her and Vashti got along really well. They were always on watch together, and they would always talk about the killing they had done. Probably the thing Nibbles invested the most time into was trying to learn how to burrow in the sand. And at any possibility, whenever we had downtime, you would just see Nibbles just trying to dig her way deep into the sand. And I don't really know what she was going for, but she started to get pretty good at it. And despite the fact that Nibbles was a cannibal, she did pretty good at not eating her friends. She had like this sense of loyalty. And her advice to everyone is, remember kids, don't eat your friends, because then they'd be dead. And now we get to the most exciting characters in the entire party, and those are the thri-kreen. And I don't just say that because my character Salentithius is a thri-kreen, but also a little bit I say it because my character Salentithius is a thri-kreen. My favorite part is that you don't really need to worry about drinking water, and also your AC starts at 15 and only goes up from there. So Salentithius was an arcane rogue, which meant that he should have been really good at sleight of hand and all that, which he was on paper, but just couldn't steal anything to save his life. But also he was pretty decent at casting spells. I liked him because he was a pretty balanced character, and I could dole out quite a bit of damage with a Githka and my sneak attack, but I also had some good spells like Magic Missile, Ray of Frost, and Chill Touch that I could shoot from a distance and cause some damage at least. When we first started the campaign, my favorite weapon was just my claws because it was 4 hits that I got, and then I could also bite as a bonus action. But as the story progressed and as we gained access to metal weapons, I switched over to using the Githka. especially because I got sneak attack if I had an ally within 5 feet of the enemy I was attacking, and that made a huge difference. My sleight of hand and stealth were super high. I think I had a +7, and that made a huge difference, not when it came to stealing things, but when it came to checking for traps and disarming them and picking locks when we came into dungeons. If Salantithius had any words of advice to offer, it would be don't trust cacti and hang out with heroes so you also look like a hero. And the final member of our party was also a thri-kreen. His name was Drudok and he was a bard, which was just to confuse us about Bardock the druid. So many confusing times with those names. Drudok was from the College of Whispers, which is from Xanathar's guide, and mostly from that he used psychic blades, which were great for dealing extra damage. At level 4, he took the feat crossbow expert, which allowed him to use dual crossbows, so one on each arm. And because he's a thri-kreen, he also technically had 2 other arms free. We were lucky to have him around too because he did have cure wounds, which made a huge difference. And then in battle, he would typically use fairy fire to give us advantage, or sleep to give us an advantage in a different way. And while Drudok was proficient with many weapons, like Salantithius, he did prefer to use his hands a lot, and he also preferred to talk his way out of situations or make it more interesting than just a simple punch. To do this, he started to get pretty good at using poisons, and then there was that great experiment with the agony beetle in the vial that turned out very well for us and very terribly for the Mandusa. Along the lines of him talking his way through battles or doing things that shouldn't work but somehow always did, Drudok was amazing at deception and also persuasion. So it was great to have him around anytime we had to lie or anytime we had to get out of a situation that we maybe couldn't fight our way out of. And finally, advice from Drudok, which is something that he spoke about the entire campaign, is remember kids to always wear your bones on the outside because thri-kreen have like the chitin bone on the outside. And never trust an elf that isn't on a plate. Finished off by Bug Life! But I don't have enough arms. So that is a quick overview of where our characters are now today versus where they were when we started. If you go back to the first Welcome to the Dark Sun video, I'm pretty sure I go over the majority of our characters there, but this is just a little bit more in-depth. And as we got to know our characters, how their personalities shone through and what skills we liked the best out of all of them. I know today would typically be an update day, but we did finish our session on Friday night, and so I want to get this video in first before I tell you how everything ends. So there will be a bonus video coming this Wednesday, so make sure you watch out for that and hit that subscribe button so you'll know when it goes up. And then next Sunday is going to be a slightly different video again, where my DM is going to come and talk about this campaign and what his thought process was and how he crafted it and all that sort of stuff. And then, wait, there will be one more bonus video because we are starting into a new Dark Sun campaign very soon. So I will talk about the new characters that we roll and the new campaign setting as we get ready to launch off into that in like a week and a half's time. So with that, thank you for watching and I will see you next time.